Body brokers, also known as non-transplant tissue banks, are firms or individuals that buy and sell cadavers or human body parts. In the US, it is an industry run akin to the Wild West, unregulated and out of control. Experts in many professions have been begging the federal government to do something about this for decades now. And in June 2023, a bill was introduced to do just that, but no word since then. The US is not the only country with a runaway body broker problem, but they do lead it. So how does this all work, and why has nothing been done about it? Before we begin, we post death and dying related videos every Friday, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's talk body brokers. Before we look at the more juicy stuff, let's make sure we all understand what body brokering is and isn't. In Australia, it is illegal to buy or sell body parts, any body parts. You cannot make a profit off body parts, be it in cash or gifts, and this is heavily regulated and monitored. But in other countries, there are no laws on the books regarding the buying and selling of body parts. No laws either way to say whether you can or cannot profit from bodies. And because bodies aren't just raining from the sky, they are in high demand, meaning there is a lot of money to be made. Which is where the donation of bodies turns into the selling of bodies, but we'll get back to that part in a minute. Because the other question is, who the hell is buying bodies? For what purpose do you need one? Well, firstly, this isn't the 1800s. Medical schools are not paying for cadavers for their medical students anymore. In most countries, there are plenty of people donating their bodies to university programs, and all goes well. And it's not for organ donation either, because that too is highly regulated, though they certainly aren't overflowing with donations in that area, so please sign up to donate if you can. No, these bodies are wanted by companies that you wouldn't necessarily think of. Let's give some examples of companies who have bought from body brokers that didn't go too well. Johnson & Johnson, the pharmaceutical, biotech and medical tech company, needed to show off some of its new medical products to potential investors. They hired a hotel ballroom, rich people came, there are multiple torsos on gurneys around the ballroom with staff members to explain the product. Yeah, those torsos were bought from body brokers. Johnson & Johnson claimed that they didn't know the families of the deceased had been tricked into signing over the bodies. And another example is the US military, who need to test weapons and safety gear on actual bodies. Multiple times it has been discovered that the bodies that they bought had no consent involved. And each time they claimed they were also the victim because they were screwed over by the body brokers too. Then there are the many musculoskeletal transplant companies which are conveniently all registered as non-profit but rack up hundreds of millions of dollars, who craft implants made from human tissue, usually bone. The ones who have been found to have bought non-consensual donations, including the world's largest tissue company, MTF, all claim they didn't know either. Now I call bullshit, but what do I know? So is there any possibility that they may not have had any idea about it? The business model of a body broker looks a bit like this, and their business model relies on them having plenty of free access to donations. So let's start there. Remember in our donating bodies to science video that we did a few weeks back, where I said if you're going to donate your body to science in the US, please go directly through a university program? Well, this is one way they get you. University programs are not allowed to advertise their body donation programs. Body brokers will advertise that they are part of university programs and just leave the body with us and we'll get it there safe and sound. Yeah, that body is not going to a university, it's going to be sold. Another way they do it is to get very friendly with local funeral homes, usually those that aren't doing so well, and say, you get your clients to sign the deceased over to us and we'll give you a kit back, because money talks, right? Similar kickbacks are offered to staff in hospitals and morgues as well. Another way they get hold of bodies is to target those who are elderly or impaired in some way who can be easily tricked, or those who are poor, by saying that they'll do a free cremation, in which case they'll usually give back a box of sand in return or just disappear. In countries outside the US, families of the deceased are known to be threatened, pressured, or tricked into signing consent papers to donate their loved one's body. Or brokers have very friendly relationships with prisons in these countries who give them the bodies of executed prisoners. And for reference, these are the countries that we know for damn sure have a body broker problem to different degrees. USA, Mexico, Slovakia, Estonia, Hungary, Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, China, India, Thailand, Vietnam. These bodies often end up on their way to companies in the US. Now, once the body broker has acquired a body, they can either sell it directly to the buyer who will actually be using it, or they can sell it to another individual or company who then sells it on further. By the time a body part turns up to its final destination, it has probably been sold many, many times over, particularly if it winds up at a transplant company, because it effectively goes through a factory process and it gets sold on at a higher and higher price, everyone getting their cut. But I wouldn't care if it was my body. I know at least a few people will write this in the comments, because they always do. So let me be blunt. Take your head out of your ass. This isn't about you. The problem has nothing to do with what the deceased wanted, because they ain't feeling, thinking, or have an opinion about anything. Problem one is that families are being manipulated and often threatened into handing over the bodies of their loved ones. They are often deliberately targeted because they are poor and brokers know they can't afford a funeral or body disposal. Problem two, these bodies are rarely tested for diseases, so a body with HIV or hepatitis could easily end up in the system. Their parts could be implanted into someone else, which is a big problem if these parts are really fresh. Also, many of these body brokers are not some big company with a lot of cash, particularly at the start. So bodies often aren't kept in reasonable conditions. And, well, meat that has gone rancid is not what you want floating around on the open market. Problem three, and this is wild to me how this can even happen, is bodies are bought from morgues, for example, and they haven't been autopsied. Bodies who are dead because of a crime, which means those crimes are often not reported or investigated. Now, I know many morgues in the US, particularly in mega cities like LA and New York, are overrun with unclaimed corpses, and they are just insanely busy places. So maybe that's how the police never found out. I don't know, but that scenario seems to keep popping up again and again. So let's have a look at a few body broker scandals. Michael Mastromarino. So this dude was president of Biomedical Tissue Services that was shut down in 2005 after said president and 2 employees were arrested and convicted of illegally harvesting human bones, organs, tissues and other cadaver parts from individuals awaiting cremation, for forging numerous consent forms, and for selling the illegally obtained body parts to medical companies without the consent of families. Mr. Michael here is serving 58 years in a maximum security prison outside New York. He has no remorse and describes himself more of a human tissue broker than a body thief, stating, "This is an industry. It is a commodity, like flour on the commodities exchange. It is no different. I cut some corners, but I knew where I could cut corners. We were providing a fantastic product." Really, we could do an entire video on this former dental surgeon turned drug addict turned body broker, but you get the idea. Arthur Rathburn. Rathburn from Detroit earned $13 million from 1997 to 2013 by selling or leasing human remains that had been donated to science, and was sentenced to 9 years in prison in 2018. He was not prosecuted for his treatment of human remains as, like we said earlier, US laws govern only body parts intended for transplantation, such as heart and livers. Instead, he was convicted of defrauding customers and violating hazardous shipping laws. It is said that he supplied unwitting medical educators with body parts infected with HIV and hepatitis at least 120 times from 1997 to 2013. During the trial, an FBI agent testified that Rathburn took very little care of his stockpiled body parts in freezers in his Detroit warehouse, and said parts from various donors were found frozen together in flesh-on-flesh chunks. Charming, which reminds me I need to clean out my freezer. And it's not like no one saw this coming. In the mid-2000s, for example, New York State health inspectors twice reprimanded him for failure to provide documentation that bodies he acquired were in fact willingly donated. Rathburn also had been on the radar of federal authorities since 2010, when border agents first questioned him about 10 heads he was transporting from Canada. And no, he had no remorse for that either, describing himself as a visionary who was just ahead of his time. Hi guys, just wanting to take a moment to say that if you're enjoying this video, please give it some love and click the like and subscribe button. And if you really like it and think someone else might be interested, perhaps share it with others. What this industry says about society. In everything that I've read about body broking, all experts agree that the reason the government has never attempted to put a stop to this is, no surprise, money and leverage. The same reason that many of society's issues haven't been changed. Don't say it. which means those in charge are willing to sacrifice a lot of others for a whole lot of cash. But this issue also shows off other social issues, the big one being just how underpaid staff are in many fields. Yes, some are psychopaths who are just happy to take the money, but there are many good people working in hospitals, morgues, and funeral homes who don't want to compromise their ethics but aren't getting paid enough to get by, that they agree to do things that they might not otherwise have done. The other issue that's brought up is how many companies and departments you thought you could trust but actually can't be trusted. We don't expect much from pharmaceutical companies, but if you were paying $500 each to see an autopsy of a body in a hotel ballroom, one might expect that that body was of a consenting individual, because pharmaceutical companies had the money to pay for that, right? Okay, so in Australia, that whole premise would seem sketchy as hell. But apparently in the US, this kind of thing happens regularly. I found so many body and hotel ballroom events, and I didn't even have to search all that hard. Which, as a side note, I get many of us have a fascination with morbid stuff. But please think through what events you pay money to attend. I get that this stuff is normal over there, and you probably just assume they are doing the right thing. But if you do care about the dead or ethics, please stop and think first before purchasing a ticket. Another trusted and much respected institution, at least in the US, is the military. And since they can do no wrong, of course they were heartbroken when they found out the bodies were not consensually donated that they blew up. Really? You really think that? Do I have to explain why that is so very unlikely? Hi folks, sorry for this awkward pause in proceedings. So when we uploaded this to YouTube, they striked us and said that we needed to get rid of this particular part. Apparently somewhere in YouTube's terms and conditions, there must be something about not making snide remarks about the US military. I don't know, I didn't look much further into it, but it is sus as hell. And yet my necrophilia and cannibal videos live on. Go figure. All right, back to the video. The third important point that this all brings up is that there is not enough people signed up as organ donors when compared to demand. Now, increasing numbers of registered donors won't solve all problems in this area, far from it. But there is a portion of body brokering that ends up where organ donation should be. Skin and ligament grafts are the biggest example of this. These shouldn't have to be bought, but a lot of the times they are. Please go register to be an organ donor in your country. Now, while there are many bad body brokers out there, and experts would say bordering on the majority, there are legit ones out there that are out trying to do things as ethical as they possibly can and do the right thing. But as long as there is big money to be made really easily with no legal consequences or regulation, the industry will always be contentious with bad players. Let us know in the comments the most outrageous body broker scandal that you've heard of. And with that, go talk death.